ranch house. Just get to the site. A mile down there. Which we're going to next.
Welcome. You're now just at the entrance to Ground Zero, and this thing behind you, Dwayne will tell you about. Dwayne has got a degree in physics from University in Ohio, which is called Heidelberg. Thank you. And then moseyed out here to get a job with Sandia. Spent about 36 years. Close enough, okay. With Sandia in various projects. I had the opportunity to work with Dwayne when he was working with Sandia, and I was with the city of Albuquerque probably 10 or 15 years ago. And then we reacquainted when I came to the museum. So Dwayne is going to talk about Jumbo.
You probably never heard about Jumbo. You're here with what's left of it, and you have to use your imagination now. Jumbo, you only see part of it. You see about 15 feet of it. Original Jumbo was 28 feet long. One end of it had a dome shape on it. The other end looked like a thermos bottle. It had its neck down and looked like the inside of a thermos bottle. So what is it? You know, when I look at it, I think of four questions. What is it? Why is it here? How did they build it and get it here? And then finally, what happened to it? You only see less than half of it. The inside here is two plates of steel that are welded together, rolled into a semicircle and welded together. And you can see one of the welds up there. The outside then is a lot missing. This wouldn't have been strong enough to hold the explosives in Fat Man. They wrapped 36 layers of quarter-inch thick steel bands around the center portion. So that's another 9 inches of steel wrapped on here. Well, who's going to do that? You know, you got to find somebody in the country to do that. They searched around, and the only company in the country was Babcock and Wilcox in Barberton, Ohio. They had the reputation, and they were building high-pressure vessels. But boy, when they got the specs for this, it was way beyond what they'd ever done. They'd never welded steel over 4 inches thick. They never handled anything this big. They had to build the jigs to hold this big thing. They had to figure out how to wrap these bands around it. Bands were 1/4 inch thick, about 42 inches wide, and they had to be staggered on that. Once they got the bands wrapped, then the outside diameter is 12.5 feet. The inside diameter is 10 feet. It posed a great problem. They even turned it on the lathe to smooth the outside underneath the bands. So imagine having a lathe big enough to turn that sucker and machine the outside. It really stretched Babcock and Wilcox, but they were able to do it. The other thing was it was complete secrecy. The different parts of it were farmed out at Babcock and Wilcox. So very few people knew what it looked like in total, and none of them knew what it was for. The historian, I talked to the historian of Babcock and Wilcox, and he said they now have no information about Jumbo. It was so secret that anyone with the specifications or photos of it were escorted by a member of the FBI. The FBI confiscated all that information as soon as the job was done. And Babcock and Wilcox tried to get the information back for their archives, as late as the 1970s and still never got it back. So specifications, everything on it are really missing. Well, why is it here? And that's the big question. The uranium bomb was felt to be, they knew a lot about uranium. They could do that in a gun-type weapon, which was fairly simple by shooting a slug of uranium down the gun barrel, going into a donut-shaped piece of uranium at the other end, and then going supercritical. However, that wouldn't work on plutonium. Plutonium is more radioactive than uranium, and it tends to start heating up and blowing apart physically before it can go supercritical and have a nuclear explosion. So they had to figure out some way of assembling it faster than they could in a gun barrel. And that's where they came up with the implosion type design. Very complex. What you imagine is a soccer ball with 32 faces. Each of those are an explosive lens with a detonator on it. And all those detonators have to go off simultaneously. The explosives are designed to burn in instead of out. So you get a shock wave traveling in and imploding. And that takes a tennis-sized hollow ball of plutonium and squeezes it down to about the size of a golf ball. When it does, then the neutrons have such short distances to move that the likelihood is high that they'll hit another nuclei. Very complex, 100 pieces of machine explosive in there, plus you've got a 5-foot diameter, what they called gadget. They weren't allowed to use the word bomb. You know, that was classified bomb. They call it the gadget. And you had a 5-foot diameter, and you had to get all these detonators to fire simultaneously to get a imploding shock wave hitting that plutonium. They decided they had to test it. And now we go back to February of 1944. That's just 1.5 years before the test here. And at that time, plutonium had just been discovered by Glenn Seaborg out at the University of California on their cyclotrons. They knew it existed, they knew it was radioactive and would work, it would fission, but they didn't have any material in February of 1944 to test. It could, brittleness, tensile strengths, didn't even know what color it was. So, but they knew it would work if they could get it. And so General Groves decided to not only produce uranium at Oak Ridge, but to start the reactors up in Hanford, Washington, to produce the plutonium. So it was very precious. Well, a year and a half later, they were worried about, well, wonder if we test it and the explosives go off, but it doesn't go nuclear. It would spread this very precious plutonium all over the area, and they would lose it. And so they were worried about that. So they thought, well, they'd build a great big, humongous vessel that if the explosives went off, it would contain the plutonium inside. That went along pretty well. You know, good idea back in the early '44. So they started building. By August is when Babcock and Wilcox, August of '44, started building it. So that's why they had it. They had to build it. Now, how do they get it out here? You know, Barberton, Ohio is a long way from where we're standing right here. They could only bring it by rail, but not even all our railroads could you go on. The bridges weren't strong enough. The tunnels were too little. And they're after us. Those are F-16s going over there.
Don't stand on the bed sheet.
Yeah, don't stand on the bed sheet. I told that on our bus. they had to get it out here, so they turned to the War Department's Office of Transportation, and there was a captain that headed up that organization. It was a walking encyclopedia of railroads, and they decided, well, they could take it from Barberton to Joliet, Illinois, then take it down to New Orleans, and then bring it across Texas up to Clovis to Belen, and then finally down here to a railroad siding which is 30 miles out that way. Well, they had that worked out, but then what did they put this thing on? They didn't have a rail car. They never hauled an object that weighed 214 tons. And that's 100 SUVs, large SUVs. They never hauled that. They found a car that U.S. Steel used in one of their mills in Pennsylvania, probably Pittsburgh, to haul large ingots of molten steel on. It had 12 large wheels, six on each end, 3 bogies on each end, with a recessed center. And this would fit in that, all 28 feet. That trailer, or the car, weighed 157 tons. Now you got 214 tons, and if you multiply that out, you get 742,000 pounds that they had to transport out here. They got it to the siding down here that they built. They built a special siding. Now they have to get it up here 30 miles without any roads. They had the Rogers brothers in Albion, Pennsylvania, build a 64-wheel trailer that had flotation tires, large oversized tires, and they built that trailer in 30 days and had it out here.
It sounds like you.
Amazing. They pushed that then up the 30 miles with bulldozers. They were pushing with bulldozers and pulling it with bulldozers. Pull it up, and from the air you can still see the tracks that it left coming up here. Well, they got it up here all right, but then now the clock goes forward, and we're at May of 1945, just a couple months before the test. They got it up here, and lo and behold, they decided not to use it. So anyway, they decided not to use it. Why? Because in that period of time, we became very confident about plutonium. We were producing it at high rates. It wasn't very precious. They were worried about 214 tons of steel obscuring the diagnostics of the original fireball. They wanted to get in and see what the radiations and the colors and everything. So that was another reason. The other reason is they didn't want to put another 214 tons of fallout up in the air. So they decided not to use it. But now here's since General Groves, and this thing cost him $12 million. And at that time you could build a bomber for $100,000. So he had a big investment in this. But he thought, well, he tested by setting it up anyway. So they set it up 2,400 feet, and it's just about this area from ground zero. Set it up, held up by a structure sitting on the domed end. The shot went off, and it blew the whole structure away. But there sits Jumbo there on its end, unscathed, and you can see around here. You can see a picture of Jumbo. Well, now how did it get in this condition if it survived the thing unscathed? General Groves was a very, at times I guess paranoid, very conservative, and he imagined himself in front of a congressional hearing explaining to them why he had spent $12 million on something that didn't get used. And so the story goes. So he had the thing filled up with 500-pound bombs that blown up. And so it ended up blowing the ends off. The steel bands apparently were salvaged after they hauled that off as scrap. And then they buried the rest, and it was dug back up in the 1970s and is on display. It shows you the extent that the scientists and engineers went to in the Manhattan Project to assure success. They were very conservative, bunch of brilliant people, and they didn't have computers. All they had were slide rules. So it's amazing what they did. Anyway, this is what's left. Have any questions on it, or any questions?
Yeah, one. Sir?
Over here.
No, it's yeah.
Once they got the bomb in it, then was the opening, the ends welded together, or how were they going to put it together?
Well, that detail's lost. I've looked at a lot
Okay.
of pictures. I think they closed up the neck, and they had these big bolts or big rods that held that in.
Okay.
But you're raising I've researched that, and there's a lot of questions in that. One is how you go get that big thing and that small bomb.
Yeah.
Hey, is it still radioactive? The answer is no. Yesterday there was a radiological survey done of the whole area. That's done each year before the public's allowed on. If you're at ground zero for 1.5 hours, you get the radiation dose of a flight from Albuquerque to Dallas. It's that level. So anyway, it's very low level. All the Trinitite has been scooped up and hauled off. Any other questions? That's the shrapnel from the bombs when they went off. You can see you wouldn't want to have been in there. That'd be the pieces of bomb cases going out and hitting it. This part here they say weigh about 100 tons, but I think that's probably a high estimate there.
Second, 2010, with the rest of America. And none. Claim the radioactivity is very small here, but I do feel like clicking. Click.
The person who will give the talk here at Ground Zero is Clint Wesnut. He is retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel, and he has a lot of information about the maintenance and of the weapons over the years. He was curator of the classified weapons museum on Kirtland Air Force Base. He's been a volunteer at the museum for 3 years and brings a great wealth of information about nuclear weapons and their use. So he's all set here to talk about what happened right here back in July 16th, 1945. So, Clint, you want to?
Okay. Get my brain to go on here. Okay. At about 5:29 and 45 seconds. Keep it close. Pardon? Point it straight at your mouth and keep it close. Okay, like so. Can you hear me now?
Very direct.
Nice okay. Like the guy from Verizon. Can you hear me now? Okay, as I mentioned, at about 5:29 and 45 seconds in July of 1945, about 100 feet straight up from here, occurred the first atomic detonation and began the atomic era. But going back a little bit before that, to give you some chronology. On the 7th of May of that year, a test explosion was set off just south of here, the purpose of which was to check out instrumentation, the camera setups, as well as they had dispersed among the cartons of the Comp B3, which is for you explosive experts, is a combination of RDX 6040 to TNT. And they dispersed amongst the cartons of that radioactive sludge from Hanford, Washington. The purpose of that was to get an idea of the fallout pattern from a detonation in this area. And at the museum, we have a aerial photo taken of the area not too long after the detonation, and you can still see the footprint of that 100 tons of RDX. Okay, on the 13th of August, excuse me, July, okay, get my month straight, 13th of July, the folks brought the assembled plutonium sphere that from the ranch house where we just came from, brought it out and attempted to insert it into the pit of the gadget. Caused some quick consternation. It wouldn't fit. You could hear the, oh my goodness, all the way to Los Alamos. As you can imagine, in August, the temperature out here is pretty high. They were in a room for 6 hours assembling the two hemispheres, in a room that was sealed. Windows were sealed and covered with plastic to keep the dust out. Got very hot. So the temperature, the gadget was kept in the shade and as cool as possible, so the temperature differential wouldn't allow it to fit. So they got ambient temperatures back to the same, and it slid in and everybody went, and so after the insertion of the material, they hoisted the gadget to the top of a 100-foot tower. Why 100 feet? The best explanation I've heard of that is that was the standard height of the towers that the Forest Service had. We got to run out of the warehouse from the Forest Service and we used it. They hoisted the gadget to the top of the 100-foot tower, inserted the detonators and hooked them up, and then looked at the meteorologist, who incidentally was the same meteorologist, Jack Hubbard, that Eisenhower used here at D-Day. The best of the best. Groves got what he asked for. And he said we're going to have about 2 more days of very bad weather. So they said, well, we've got to get this thing going. One of the reasons for the time concerns, and I'll digress just for a moment, at the time that this test was being conducted, President Truman, as those of you who were at the museum last night heard, was at the Potsdam conference, along with Stalin and company. And he wanted to make sure that the Russians, they weren't the Soviets at the time, did not participate in the defeat of Japan, because we didn't want to split Japan in half like we had Germany and Europe. So we wanted to get this thing done to see if it was going to work or not. Do we need them and to take Japan? So the word got to them afterwards that we didn't. So in any event, that was why we were pushing the time. So Hubbard said we got about 2 days of hot weather, or hot bad weather, and we will try to track and see if we got some openings. So they got it ready to go. The next day, it was still raining, but they did the instrument checkout in the rain. And still raining, and the weather and lightning and all this good stuff. And so they kept it on the stand waiting for a clearing the weather. It was guarded by 2 physicists. You heard about the 2 physicists that drove down here, the hemispheres. These were 2 other physicists that gave Tommy guns and said, secure it.
Now that's scary.
I don't know what gives me greater trepidation. A 5,000-pound ball of explosive with plutonium inside it at a 100-foot tower in the middle of the desert in a lightning storm, or 2 PhDs in physics with Tommy guns. No offense to any PhDs in physics that are here. But in any event, finally, on the morning of the 16th, Hubbard said we're going to have it was scheduled to go at 4 o'clock in the morning. He said that was still raining, still stormy, but he said, looks like we're going to have about a 2-hour window of no rain and light wind. And so they decided to set up the detonation for 5:10. They set the timer at 10 minus 20, and at 5:29 and 45 seconds, the detonation occurred. And at that point in time, the temperature here at ground zero leaped up to in excess of 1,000,000 degrees Fahrenheit, centigrade. At that temperature, take your pick. Overpressures in the millions of pounds per square inch. And we had neutrons, gamma rays, X-rays going out at the speed of light in all directions, as well as photons. The flash was quite bright. Was observed as far away as my book says 280 miles, but Taos. Some stories say that they saw it as far as southern California or Colorado. The blast wave took out windows at 120 miles. It certainly destroyed the windows at the McDonald Ranch house, blew the chimney over, as Milo told you. And that was felt as far away as 160 miles. In setting up for the test, the contractors had built 3 bunkers at 10,000 yard distances from ground zero, called the 10K, north, south, and west. East, we got the mountains, so they didn't build one over there. The south bunker was where the fire team, which was Dr. Bainbridge, who was also the test director, Dr. Kiskowski, I got it out right, and thank you, and Joe McGilbert, who was the fire team. But they're the ones that closed the switches and got it set up and set the timer for the detonation. Also in the south bunker were Dr. Oppenheimer and Dr. Furby, as well as General Farrell, who was the general who signed for the plutonium, and he wanted to watch it go up in smoke. He was also the assistant to Groves. Groves and the rest of the base camp people were back at base camp, which is about 10 miles south. And also, we pointed out as we came in the front gate on Campanile Hill, were some other VIPs, Teller and company, and some other scientists that were brought down from Los Alamos. The flash of light again, I mentioned, was very bright. There was a young lady, Nancy Green, I think was her name, was blind. She was being taken back up to school, up what used to be 85, now is 25. And she, quote, saw the flash, even though she was blind. A few hours after the detonation, Fermi climbed into a lead-lined tank with a sergeant, whose name I do not know. We think we'd have a record of that. That took some guts too. It was lead-lined. They drove the tank down into the crater. The crater at its center point was about 10 feet deep, and it was about 2,500 feet in diameter. Taking radiation readings, they went in and stayed in for a few minutes, got some ratings, came back out, and were not duly exposed. We've had several questions about the residual radiation here. It's less than a half a millirem per hour. Lower than the background radiation you get in Albuquerque or Denver. And an hour here at the site would give you less exposure than if you took an air flight from here to the East Coast. So there's no danger. Obviously, wouldn't be, at least us old guys wouldn't be standing here. Okay, 3 weeks, 21 days after the test was deemed a success, the decision was made to drop the bomb on Hiroshima. It was the little boy serial number 11, to be exact. And the yield of that weapon was about 15 kilotons. It was an air burst. You optimize the effects of any detonation, particularly atomic detonation, with an air burst at some optimal height, depending on the yield, that allows the blast and thermal wave and the radiation to go out to greater distances. It also minimizes the amount of fallout you're going to suck up into the air. The mushroom cloud, which was first seen here at ground zero, the stem sucked up the material from the ground. It formed the stem of the mushroom cloud. The top of the mushroom topped out at about 41,000 feet. So in any event, that was the little boy at a 14 kiloton yield. Nothing came out from the Japanese. There was no note, no mention in any of their communications that anything had happened. Everybody, they denied it essentially. So 3 days later, the Fat Man, which was essentially a duplicate of the gadget that was detonated here, but had been encapsulated in a aerodynamic shape, so we could be reasonably sure it would be pointed at the ground at the right time so that we could use the radars to detonate it. And that weapon was dropped at Nagasaki. And I think the details of that the flight were given to you later. If not, we can talk about them on the bus. But in any event, there was a third bomb, or material for a third bomb. The shapes, the bomb bodies, the explosive spheres were already on Tinian for a number of bombs. We were prepared to drop them as long as the Japanese refused to surrender. And so the material for the third one, we had no more uranium, so this is another 2 hemispheres of plutonium-239. We're on an airplane on the way out to Tinian. We got some intel from radio traffic out of Tokyo to the islands, telling the Japanese that they might start getting ready to surrender. Truman, who wanted to limit the amount of times we had to use it, the weapons called it back, said halt. He pulled stopped the aircraft with the plutonium at what's now Travis, Air Force Base, California. Had it brought back to Los Alamos, and then on the 14th, Hirohito said, "We give up." And surrender went out, so we never had to use the last weapon. Thank God. So, to give a little bit more history of after the event, as I mentioned, the crater was about 2,500 feet in diameter. Deepest part was about 10 feet at ground zero here. In 1953, they came in, dug up the Trinity, disposed of it, some classified location. I think some of it got out into the concession stands over in El Capitan, I think. So you can supposedly buy some. But then they filled in the middle 300 feet of the crater. And there's still a slight depression here at ground zero, as you can see as you look around, but nothing like the crater that was here earlier. In 1984 or 85, the Park Service redid the McDonald Ranch House, restored it to the way it looked in 1945, and made it a natural historic site. And then the last several years, twice a year, this is an active bomb range, missile range, bomb range. They still fire short-range missiles into here, testing this concept and that concept, defensive radar tracking and so forth. There's also a lot of undetonated ordnance scattered around. They used it for several years, dropping bombs out of B-17s, B-24s here, testing, training navigators and bombardiers. So the site is closed to the public. They open it up currently for the public twice a year, first week in April, first week in October. Occasionally we'll open it up for special groups. We brought 2 bus loads in down in June. They opened it up just for the museum. And so they keep it very tightly on the roads, not just because there's some classified locations, sensitive locations out there, but because there's some dangerous stuff still laying out there. Not quite as bad as Verdun probably, but they're still blowing stuff. People still getting killed in France in World War I ordnance that didn't explode. So that's why they keep us on the path. Okay, that's all I have.
What time did you want us back?
We need to be back at the bus at 11:20. We want to get on boarded and out of here at 11:30 so we can get our lunch. So we can feel free to go out and the wind shifted, the fallout went in a different direction than anticipated. They had 160 GIs and 2.5-ton trucks set up to go out, and if the fallout went anywhere near the inhabited area, they were going to go out and clean and pick them up and evacuate them. As it turned out, it headed toward the mountains. There were very few people and just a few cows. 30 of them got dusted with fallout. Their hides turned white in spots. They policed them up, I guess bought them, took them to a ranch over in Texas, and watched them for the next 25 years till they died of old age. So, is that it? Okay. Any kind of questions?
About the dog. Cool. No, that's okay. Just nothing like running stuff, you know.
As in there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No heaven. Lovers only sky. Imagine all the people living for today.
Right in on it.